Across decades and continents, people from every walk of life have reported moments that defy explanation, lights that move with intent, figures that shouldn't exist, and encounters that leave a mark long after the night ends. Tonight, we step into a collection of these accounts, each one a glimpse into the unknown. Welcome to Strange Encounters. My name is Pat Eudy, and what I'm about to tell you is something that stayed buried in my mind for over 2 years, locked away behind a wall I couldn't break through. For the longest time, I didn't know if what I remembered was real, imagined, or some strange mix of both. But I knew one thing for sure. On a night of March 1979, something happened to me on a lonely back road outside Monroe, North Carolina. Something I never truly understood until much later. That night started off ordinary enough. I'd driven over to Locust to visit a friend. We talked for a while, had a couple of beers, nothing that would have made me lose track of myself. Around 3 a.m., I decided to head home. I lived with my mother at the time, off US 601 South. It was quiet out there, the kind of quiet where the stars seemed louder than the wind. I was driving down the back road toward the Rocky River Steel Bridge, a route I'd taken more times than I could count. And like I always did, I looked up at the sky. I've always been fascinated by stars, by what might be out there. But this time, something felt different. There was a bright light, brighter than anything I'd ever seen at night. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a star. It was just there, hanging over the sky in a way that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I slowed my car, watching it, and then nothing. Just blank, like somebody hit a switch in my brain. One moment I'm staring at this impossible light in the sky, and the next I'm driving again. Except I'm not anywhere near the bridge anymore. I'm suddenly 8 miles away, passing GB Helm Store on Morgan Mill Road, heading toward home. I didn't know how I got there. I didn't remember turning. I didn't remember driving. Nothing. Just a missing piece. 3 hours of my life gone. When I finally got home, it was around 6:20 in the morning. My eyes were burning so badly, I could barely keep them open. My skin felt like it was stinging, itching like I'd been exposed to something I didn't understand. The feeling lasted for days. I treated it myself, rubbing lotion on my hands and ankles, putting drops in my eyes. I didn't go to a doctor. Back then, I didn't even know what I'd say if I tried. I told myself maybe I fell asleep at the wheel. Maybe I had some kind of blackout. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Something had happened, something I couldn't explain. For more than 2 years, I wrestled with it. I tried to push it aside, tried to live with the idea that maybe I didn't want to know. But it kept coming back, over and over, like a splinter you can't dig out. Finally, I wrote to a UFO research center in Ohio. I didn't expect much from it, but they put me in contact with an investigator named Henry Morton. Morton listened to my story, every frustrating detail of what I couldn't remember, and he suggested I speak with a psychologist, Dr. Richard Pinot, in Winston-Salem. Not because he thought I was crazy, but because he believed there might be memories locked away in my mind, memories that could be recovered if I was willing. So I agreed. And that session, that changed everything. Under relaxation, I began to remember pieces, small things at first, like colors, sensations, sounds. And then the pieces fit together into something I never expected. I remembered being inside something, a craft, a UFO. The first room I saw was bright, almost too bright. Everything inside had a metallic look to it, smooth, clean, almost sterile. And standing there, just a few feet from me was, well, the only word I had for it was astronaut. The being was about 5 feet tall, 2 arms, 2 legs, wearing a suit the same light metallic color as the room around us. Its face was hidden behind a dark visor, so dark I couldn't see the eyes behind it. And it never spoke, not once. No sound, no gestures. It just stood there, watching me. You'd think I'd be terrified, and I was, but something else hit me too. Curiosity. I remember asking questions. So many questions. How did the craft work? What powered it? How did they move? It was like my mind latched onto the only thing it could control, wanting to understand. After a few minutes, the being guided me, without touching me, into another room. This one was dark, calmer, but my fear kicked back in the moment I saw the chair in the center of the room. It looked like something you'd see in a doctor's office, and before I knew it, I was strapped into it. I didn't feel violated, but I felt helpless. I don't remember everything they did, but I remember pressure on my fingers. Later, when I noticed the pain, I wondered if they'd taken blood samples. It wouldn't surprise me. The strange thing is, I have no memory of leaving the craft, no memory of going back to my car, but somehow that craft moved me, maybe even picked up my car and carried it those 8 miles. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the experience ended. My memory snapped back into place, and I was driving again. When the session ended, I felt something I hadn't felt since that night. Relief. Not because the truth was easy, but because now I knew I wasn't imagining it. I hadn't dreamed it. Something real happened to me out there. For a long time, I didn't want to talk about it. I'm a salesman. My job depends on people trusting me, not thinking I'm some nutcase chasing flying saucers. But eventually I realized if I stayed silent, maybe others who'd seen something would stay silent too, and I didn't want that. Because I know what it's like to keep something like this bottled up, afraid of what people might think. I know what it's like to question your own mind because the truth feels too strange to accept. So here I am, telling my story. Not to convince anyone, not to start an argument about what's real and what isn't. I'm telling it because it happened to me. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there has been carrying a story of their own, and they need to hear that they're not alone. Whatever happened that night in March 1979 changed me forever. And even though I still don't have all the answers, I know this. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't imagining it. Something found me on that dark back road, and for a few hours, I was somewhere else, inside something not made by human hands. And I'll never forget it again. I never thought I'd speak about this. For 6 long years, I kept it to myself. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because the memory was too heavy, too terrifying. People might call me mad, and maybe they would, but what I saw, what I experienced, I can't ignore it. It was June 27th, 1996, a cold winter evening in southern Chile. I was driving alone, heading from Los Sauces to Angol, through the damp roads of La Araucanía. The sky was clear, the kind of night where every star seems to burn just a little brighter. I was focused on the road, thinking about work, about home, when I noticed it. At first, I thought it was a reflection, maybe the headlights of another car in the distance. But it wasn't. The light was different, pure, white, unnaturally bright, about 3 meters in diameter, floating above the road. And then, almost as if it had a mind of its own, it started following me. I pressed the accelerator, trying to put distance between myself and that light, but something strange happened. My car slowed. No matter how hard I pushed the pedal, the speed barely increased. Panic rose in my chest. I could feel the hairs on my arms standing on end. The light moved closer, hovering above my vehicle. The radiance was so intense, I could see dust particles dancing in the air, suspended in its glow. And then came the fear, pure, crushing fear. My heart raced, my legs trembled, and suddenly I passed out. When I woke, I was somewhere else. My head throbbed, my body ached, and my car was no longer where I remembered it being. It was about 12 kilometers from the spot where the light had first appeared. I looked at my wristwatch. It had stopped at 20:05. Though nearly an hour had passed, I had no memory of that time. The road stretched ahead, empty, silent. I sat there for a moment, trying to gather myself, trying to make sense of what had happened. I never told anyone, except my wife and a few close friends. The fear of ridicule, of being called insane, was too strong. And yet, even now, 6 years later, the memory doesn't fade. The headaches, the migraines, the deep ache in my bones, they are constant reminders. Sleep has become a struggle. I fear my dreams because when I close my eyes, the light returns. It hovers, slow and deliberate, always moving toward me. Chile is no stranger to UFO sightings. In fact, our nation ranks 5th in the world for reported encounters after the USA, Peru, Brazil, and Russia. And the La Araucania region, this part of the country has seen its share of strange lights, strange vehicles in the sky. An expert with CIFOAL once described the massive presence of UFOs between Angol and Victoria, visible even to the unaided eye. But knowing that doesn't ease the lingering terror I felt that night. I remember the feeling of that light as if it were alive. It wasn't an airplane, not a helicopter, nothing I could identify. It had purpose, awareness, intent. And when it landed on top of my car, the intensity of the radiance was overwhelming. My body responded before my mind could, and consciousness slipped away from me entirely. Waking up, disoriented, I tried to retrace the path I had traveled, but nothing made sense. The empty road stretched endlessly. My car engine had barely been used, yet I was further down the road, as if the hours I had lost had been compressed into some other dimension. I felt small, insignificant, and utterly alone in the darkness. Even now, I replay that night over and over in my mind. I recall the damp chill of the air, the isolation of the winding roads, the sudden emergence of that bright sphere. I relive the moments before I passed out, the acceleration, the futility, the realization that I had no control. And I remember the aftermath, the trembling, the pain, the strange stasis of my watch. I've tried to live a normal life, but the memory clings to me. I wake with headaches. I feel the phantom presence of that light, even in daylight. And I know that my body still remembers what my mind cannot fully comprehend. Friends and neighbors notice the change, the quiet tension, the lingering fear in my eyes. And I do not blame them. I would probably think the same thing if the story were told by someone else. It is strange, though. I'm no longer afraid to speak of it. Perhaps because the weight of silence became unbearable. Perhaps because keeping it secret made it all the more real. A private terror I could not escape. No one can take away what I have experienced. No one can convince me it was a dream, a hallucination, or a figment of imagination. I don't know why it happened to me. I don't know why the light followed me, why I passed out, or why I awoke so far away. All I know is that I did, and that night changed my life forever. I live with the aftermath, the questions, and the ever-present memory of something extraordinary, something beyond understanding. And though I speak now, I do not do so for attention or for fame. I speak because it happened, because someone, somewhere, might understand, because the fear, the awe, and the mystery demand to be told. I saw a light that night, bright, deliberate, and otherworldly. and it followed me, touched me, and vanished. But its memory remains, and it always will. Sedalia, Missouri has always been the kind of place where winter nights come early and stay quiet. Rolling farmland, wide stretches of open fields, and narrow county roads that disappear into darkness the moment you leave town. It was on one of those roads, late in 1974, that a local man named Gary Land took a drive that would become one of the most unsettling close encounter cases in rural Missouri history. Land wasn't looking for anything unusual that night. He finished a late shift, grabbed something to eat, and headed home toward his small farm just outside Sedalia. Traffic was non-existent, the sky was clear, and the only sounds were the gravel under his tires and the soft hum of the radio. About halfway home, he noticed a light over the fields to his right. It wasn't moving like an aircraft, it wasn't blinking or strobing, it wasn't even especially bright at first, just a steady, pale glow hovering low over the crops, too low to be a plane, too controlled to be anything drifting in the wind. At first, Lan assumed it was someone spotlighting deer. That wasn't uncommon in the area, even though it wasn't exactly legal. But within seconds, it became clear this wasn't a beam of light. This was an object. The glow began to intensify, shifting from pale white to a deep, almost orange gold, and the object moved, not across the field, but downward, as if it were settling onto the land. Curiosity got the better of him. He slowed his truck, pulled onto the shoulder, and killed the engine. The night air was cold, still, and unnervingly quiet. Out in the field, the light had stopped moving and now sat about a foot above the ground. Lance stepped out of the truck and watched as the glow dimmed just enough for him to make out the structure behind it. This was no spotlight, no vehicle, no farm equipment. The shape was round, metallic, and surprisingly clear. He estimated it was maybe 20 to 30 feet across, with a dome-like section on top. The entire exterior gave off a soft, uniform light, the kind you'd expect from a heated metal surface or something electrically charged. It didn't flicker, it didn't pulse, it simply glowed. The craft sat motionless. No sound, no exhaust, no movement. Lance stood there for several minutes, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The object didn't react to him. It didn't change color or brightness. If anything, it seemed unaware or completely indifferent to his presence. But something else changed. As the minutes passed, Land felt an unusual wave of heat wash over him. Not like standing near a fire, more like when a furnace vents warm air suddenly and unexpectedly. It was strong enough that he instinctively stepped backward, and with the heat came a sensation he later described as somewhere between pressure and lightheadedness. Not painful, but not normal. The longer he stood there, the more intense the feeling became, until he finally retreated to his truck. Even after closing the door, the warmth lingered on his skin. The craft continued to glow, continued to hover, continued to sit silently in the middle of that open field, as if waiting for something invisible to it, but lost on him. After roughly 10 minutes, the stillness broke. The object brightened sharply, shifting from orange gold into a brilliant white. Land later said the transition reminded him of watching a heating element flare when electricity first hits it. Then it rose. No dust, no wind, no blast. It simply lifted straight upward with perfect stability, gaining altitude quickly but smoothly. At about 100 feet, it paused for a moment, enough time for Land to see its underside clearly. He would recall the circular pattern, almost like vents or panels arranged symmetrically, and a deeper glow from the center of the structure. Then, in an instant, it accelerated. A bright streak, a straight-line departure, and it was gone. Lance sat in his truck long enough to convince himself he'd truly seen what he thought he had. He then drove home, shaken but steady. By morning, word had already circulated enough that the county sheriff's office arrived to inspect the field. What they found was impossible to dismiss. In the exact spot where Land said the craft had hovered, there was a perfect circle seared into the soil, a ring of scorched ground with a lighter, untouched patch in the center. The vegetation inside the ring had been dehydrated but not burned, as if exposed to extreme heat without flame. The sheriff photographed the site, took statements, and admitted privately that it was one of the strangest scenes he'd ever documented. Within a few days, the plants inside the circle began to die off, turning gray and brittle. The ground remained warm long afterward, even when the temperature dropped below freezing at night. No equipment in the area could explain the trace, and no neighbors reported anything unusual except the glow Land had seen. For Land, the aftermath was complicated. The strange sensation he felt near the craft didn't go away entirely. He experienced about a week of headaches and mild nausea, and although he never sought medical attention, he always wondered whether the heat he'd felt was more than just a physical effect. But what struck him most was the silence, not from the craft, but from other locals. A handful of people later told him they'd also seen lights that night, but none wanted their names attached. Too much stigma, too many jokes, too much risk to reputation. The Sedalia landing case faded into local memory, resurfacing only when someone brought up the old sheriff's photos at community events or when people compared it to other ground trace encounters from the 1970s. But for Gary Land, there was never any fading. He held on to that night, not out of fear, but because it revealed how easily something extraordinary can slip into the quiet corners of rural life without ever making headlines. A massive, structured craft had landed almost silently in an open field, left physical evidence, and departed with precision no aircraft in 1974, or today, could match. It wasn't a moment of panic or spectacle. It was slow, observational, and deliberate. Whatever the craft was, its presence felt intentional in a way he could never fully describe. And long after the circle in the field had disappeared under new growth, Land still found himself driving that same road at night, glancing out across the fields, wondering if he'd ever see that pale glow again. In the far west of Wales, tucked between rolling green hills and a rugged coastline, sits a quiet rural patchwork of farms and small villages. It's the kind of place where people know their neighbors, where nights are still, and where the biggest mystery on a normal week might be a missing sheep or a tractor that won't start. But in 1977, that peaceful countryside became the stage for something far stranger, something that pulled children, farmers, teachers, families, and even journalists into a story that still sparks debate today. Locals call it the Welsh Triangle, but whatever name you give it, the events of 1977 remain one of the most intense clusters of UFO and entity encounters ever reported in the United Kingdom. It all began on February 4th, Broadhaven Primary School, a cool, bright afternoon. The kids were outside on lunch break doing what kids do, running around, talking, playing football, and then a group of them started pointing toward a line of trees just beyond the playground. Behind the trees, half hidden in the branches, sat a silver craft, long, smooth, cigar-shaped, like a metallic capsule made of polished steel. Some of the kids said it hovered above the ground, some said it rested on it, but all agreed it was nothing they'd ever seen before. Then one of them shouted. There was someone standing near it, a tall figure in silver, not like an astronaut you'd see on TV, more like a human silhouette wrapped in reflective fabric. Some said the head looked oversized or helmeted. Others said the face was blacked out behind a dark visor, like a shield. The being moved, but not like a person pushing through bushes or stepping over roots. It glided, smoothly, silently, and then it disappeared behind the trees. When the kids ran back toward the school, They were hysterical. Their teachers didn't believe a word of it, not at first, but disbelief didn't last long. The next day, the headmaster sat them down one by one, privately, and had them draw what they saw. No collaboration, no whispering, just each child and a blank sheet of paper. And the drawings matched, the shapes matched, the figure matched, even the location matched. That was the moment Broadhaven went from a rumor to a national story. As a side note, I covered the Broadhaven encounter in more detail in episode 35 of Strange Encounters, titled They Weren't Human, 4 Real Close Encounter Stories. By the end of the week, reporters were in the village. Cameras filmed the schoolyard. Newspapers interviewed the children. It became one of the biggest stories Wales had seen in years. And when those articles hit the stands, the floodgates opened. People who had stayed quiet for months suddenly admitted that they too had seen strange lights in the sky. Silent objects drifting across fields. Bright discs or orbs that hovered in place for minutes before shooting off in straight, impossible lines. Some described metallic craft with domes on top, discs with glowing bands of light circling them like rings. Others saw objects the size of small aircraft that emitted no sound at all. And several adults, not children but grown men and women, claimed they also saw tall figures in silver suits near fields, roads, or tree lines. Some said these beings seemed to observe them, standing completely motionless before fading away in the darkness. The Welsh Triangle wasn't just one event. It was becoming a patchwork of encounters, happening across different towns at different times to people who didn't know each other. But the most dramatic part of the story was still developing, the kind of haunting, escalating encounter that would anchor the entire 1977 flap in folklore. Ripperston Farm sits near the coast, isolated, windswept, quiet. In 1977, it was home to the Coombs family, a husband, a wife, and their children. Hard-working, ordinary people with no interest in UFOs or paranormal stories. But from early spring into summer, their home became the epicenter of some of the most unsettling events reported anywhere in Wales that year. It started innocently enough. A few bright lights drifting across fields at night. They assumed it was a vehicle, a farmer working late, maybe even a helicopter. But the lights behaved too strangely. They moved in perfectly straight lines. They hovered low to the ground. They changed colors, white, orange, blue, without any sound. Then they started appearing close to the farmhouse, sometimes just beyond the window, sometimes right above the roof. And one night, the lights were so bright they cast long shadows across the interior walls. One evening, Mrs. Coombs stepped outside and looked toward a rocky outcrop near the property. She froze. Standing on the rocks was a tall, silver figure, 7, maybe 10 feet tall, motionless, facing the house. Its surface, or its suit, reflected light like polished foil. Its head looked smooth and rounded. Its arms hung straight down, almost too long for a human body. She stared at it, waiting for it to move, to step forward, to do anything. But the figure remained still, almost like it was studying the farmhouse. When she turned back toward the door and looked again, it was gone. The family's animals reacted long before the humans understood what was happening. The dogs refused to go out at night. Horses panicked in their stables. Livestock bunched together like something was stalking them from the fields. And always those lights. At least once, the family reported an object hovering so low over their property that they could see its structure. Not just lights, not just a silhouette, a solid craft. Some accounts describe it as cylindrical with bright windows or panels running along its sides. Others said it was disc-shaped with a band of rotating light around the middle. Either way, it was close enough to illuminate the entire yard. After the sightings intensified, the family began experiencing electrical problems. TVs buzzing with distorted images, lights flickering, appliances switching on and off, the family car stalling as a strange object appeared overhead. Some family members even reported feeling physically drained or suddenly nauseous after close encounters with the lights, symptoms often described in other global UFO cases. The Coombs family experiences were eventually published in a 1979 book called The Uninvited by Clive Harold. He portrayed their ordeal as a prolonged close encounter, not a one-off sighting, but a series of events that unfolded over months. The book brought renewed attention to the Welsh Triangle. Over the years, researchers, authors, and eventually modern podcasters revisited the area, interviewing the children who were now adults, local police officers, and surviving residents of Broadhaven and Ripperston. Even today, podcasts, documentaries, and articles continue to analyze the 1977 wave, treating it as one of Britain's most comprehensive clusters of UFO and entity reports. What makes the Welsh Triangle so enduring isn't just one story. It's the combination: children, adults, families, farmers, lights, figures, craft. Dozens of sightings over a short period, all from people who weren't looking for attention and had nothing to gain. No weather balloon explains tall silver beings. No prankster explains identical children's drawings. No aircraft explains silent, hovering objects that shoot straight upward without acceleration. And because of that, the mystery remains exactly that, a mystery. The Welsh Triangle may never get a final answer, but what happened in 1977 left a mark that hasn't faded. Broadhaven, Ripperston Farm, and the quiet villages of Pembrokeshire lived through a year when the ordinary world cracked open just a little and something stepped through, leaving behind stories that echo nearly 50 years later. A schoolyard encounter, a family under siege, a countryside lit by silent craft, and a trail of witnesses who still swear they saw something real. Whatever moved across Wales in 1977, it hasn't been forgotten. These stories come from different places, different people, yet the patterns are hard to ignore. Whatever is out there, it moves quietly, choosing its moments with purpose. As always, the truth hides somewhere between what we can explain and what we can only witness. Until next time, stay curious and stay aware. The next encounter may be closer than you think.